Hi there, thanks for stopping by. In today's video we're going to do a little product support video with our latest Sagemon template, and this one is for a crane. So let's get started. What is Sagemon? This is one of the easier names to say in English for the little dolls made from fabric and threads, often hung from mobiles in Japan for Girls' Day, Hinamatsuri. Now, they have a lot of regional names, and some of them are very difficult for an English speaker, and myself included. And so a Japanese friend suggested that as a collective word we call them Sagemon, which is from the Yanagawa area. Now, again, my apologies if I've pronounced that wrong. So this is our latest template, and this is the crane. And this template will give you the pattern pieces so that you can reuse it again and again for two different types of crane. The first being one that has an origami style to it, and the second a more of a friendly sort of style. So we're going to work the origami style today, and then the next one, when you get it and you have the instructions, should make it all very clear anyway. You'll need fabric, and you can obviously use any type of fabric that you wish, so long as it will take a very small stitch. These are hand stitched. I'm going to be using your basic quilting cotton, you know, this thing that you would get in fat quarters. And for this particular video, but obviously in Japan, they often use kimono scraps and other really nice silks. So, you know, whatever you've got about. You're going to need sewing thread, needle, something to mark your pieces out, and you'll want a little bit of stuffing. I often just use cotton wool. It's easy, I've got it about, but you know, obviously you can use a wadding or just about anything else. You can use scraps of fabric if you wish. If you want these to be hanging, you'll want some type of cord so that you can use decorative hang them. So for the folded crane, what you're going to need to do, and I'm leaving this on the black so that I can show you, is you're going to need to cut piece A, which is this piece, the circle, and that's the body, okay? And on the folded crane, this is the top of the body. So if you're color coordinating, this is something you might want to take into consideration. You're going to need to cut, and you just need one of those. Piece B is this rectangle here, ignoring the crown, that's for the second type of crane, and you're going to want to put either this straight edge or that straight edge on the fold of your fabric so that you've got a long rectangle. Piece C is your wing, and for the folded crane you want the wing that comes right down to the points here. You could, if you wanted to, use either of the wings. Wing shapes, it doesn't really matter, but the actual folding will need these corners. And you're going to need 4 of these. 2 of the outer wing color, 2 of the inner wing color. Then you're also going to need piece D, which is the neck and tail piece, so it's the same piece for both. And again, you'll want 4, so you want 2 of the outer and 2 of the inner. So here are all of my pieces cut out, and I'll show you what you need to do in the stages, but I won't bore you with me hand sewing. Things to note. When you're sewing, particularly with the wings and the head and neck, you need to make sure that you are leaving a fairly small seam, which is why you don't want too fine fabrics. So we're looking at something like that. You don't really want to come in too far. So, and you also want to keep your stitches really small, okay? So what you'll need to do is, the first thing is to turn your body piece. You want a small channel basically. So you can finger press this, and then when you stitch, you want to make sure that you're still leaving a channel. So you'll want to stitch this down again about so. This will depend upon the thickness of the cord that you choose to use to stitch this up. Now you have another option, which will become clearer as I get towards the end, that you can choose to not thread a cord through this and just work a running stitch. And if you decide to go with that option, you could make this little hem a little bit less deep. Okay, so we'll need to do that. Right sides together, we'll also need to stitch 2 wing pieces and 2 wing pieces. And we're going to need to make sure that we leave a gap, and it's easiest to leave the gap at the bottom. So if you come round the corner, and again, when I've stitched it up, I think it will become clearer for you. So 2 wing pieces, and then the sort of body head piece, right sides together, the neck and the tail the same way. Right sides together. Obviously when you're using a plain it doesn't really matter, but if you're using a patterned piece that does matter. And then we will leave that one for the making up. So I will go ahead and start stitching all of these together. So here are my pieces sewn together, and I have begun the process of turning the wing and neck pieces out. Now obviously it's very thin at the pointy part, and so I'm going to show you a little trick. You can clip your curves if you wish when you turn out, but to be completely honest, they're so small you won't get a super sharp point at the tip, but you don't really need it, and it does stop you from actually your material actually fraying too much because there's such a small seam allowance. So anyways, to the turning out. If you work a little back stitch in the seam allowance at the point. Okay, so this is the wing piece, and as I explained, you need to leave a little gap so that you can turn out. So I've just fastened on a piece of thread. Using the back of my needle, because that means I won't pierce anything, I'm going to go between the 2 layers and into the inside of the shape, okay, to come out at that gap. And I'll pull that through. I'll just take that needle off so I don't lose it. And then I'll start to turn. I'll do this part manually, sort of, don't just pull the thread because you won't have much luck. Oop. And just gently ease out. But then when you've got it turned just a little bit, you can start to pull that thread And as I say, be careful because you don't want your fabric to actually rip by putting too much pressure on it. But this will help to get it turned out much more easily. And it's starting to come now. And you can see you can just give it a little bit of pressure. And then I'm going to use a stick. This is actually a nice shawl pin. It works very well, but you can use any of your sort of sticks that have a more or less blunt edge. I would, you know, like a dull pencil. Nothing too sharp because it would probably go through your stitching. And ease out the points, the side points, which are obviously much easier. You don't need a piece of thread on that. Just so you get a nice little triangular shape. A little bit more I can do there. And just double check your tip. There's a little bit more that could come. Now if you pull that too much, you run the risk of actually bringing the seam allowance through your stitches. So do take your time. And then I'm just going to trim that close by pulling up just a little bit and trimming. And that should sink back in. Okay, so there's another wing. And I'm just going to tuck that seam allowance in. A little bit of frayed fabric. I'll get that out of the way. And then I'm going to press all of these. And points not quite come out all of the way. And again, you don't have to worry about actually heat pressing them. You can just go ahead and finger press or use a bone folder, which is what I will do. So I'll just get this other neck or tail piece done in exactly the same way. And so, a little bit of a pressing. If you have a mini iron, go ahead and use that. So now I'm ready to put everything together. This is the body piece, which will be at the top of the crane. And so ideally the red is the lining or the interior. Okay, so we need to make a tail and a neck. So we'll use the two skinny pointy pieces, and both of these have to be turned in with whichever side is your sort of main piece on the outside, so that you just get a hint of the inside. And we're going to stitch all the way up for the tail, as far up as you can go, and for the head we're going to stitch only so far up and actually form the head. Now I don't know how the traditional cranes are made. I've looked at many different pictures of the hanging decorations, and sort of this is an amalgamation. Our design is sort of our design as a representation of what I see. So I'm not sort of purporting to be this is the exact way that these are made. Now I'm going to stitch them using a ladder stitch, which is going back and forth. So I'll start there and come through. Now it's like a ladder, most ladder stitches will sort of come right the way through the threads, and so you come sort of just to the inside You work up a little bit, and then go back across. And I'm doing this because I want to make sure that that red stays sort of really nice and red and not have little specks of the white thread. But you could, of course, go ahead and just whip stitch over it if you wanted to, use a matching red thread. So whatever is easiest for you. But like everything with these small decorations, taking small stitches is much more preferable. It'll just add a nice finish. To work the head, I've stitched up, leaving a small space. The space that you leave is entirely up to you. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold down that piece. So a little bit like origami, you would fold a piece down and you can see that it's starting to form just a little representation of a head. And then what you need to do is stitch that down. So you can use a pin if it makes things easier for you. Just to hold that in place while you're stitching. So let's fold that down. And I'll put a little stitch through, a pin through. And so you can see that that's a little head shape. And then you can carry on working your stitches. So you'd work a little ladder stitch up this side. To come back through quite tightly because you want to hold that down in position, and then come across to the other side. Take that pin out now, and then I'm just going to take my thread through so it's a little bit further down so that I can work some back stitches as opposed to a knot. So I'm going to come down, I'm going to work a little back stitch and come down again. Little back stitch, and then I'm going to trim that. And there's the little head shape. So for the tail, I'm going to take that up as far as I can up to the point, again in the same way. Now with this shape, when you've completed both the head and the tail, you then want to flatten it so that it seams down the middle. So like so, and this makes the head stand proud a little bit better. And again, a finger press or a heat press if you've got a mini iron. I just don't feel like getting mine out at the moment. So that that red runs down the middle, or your whatever your lining color is, okay? So I'll crack on with the tail now. For the wing pieces, you need to take the bottom two corners, so here is your opening, and just turn them in so that they meet at the center, okay? So when you know you've got them more or less centered, go ahead and work a couple of stitches just to hold everything in place. Now these stitches won't show, So you can just whip around with these. You don't have to worry about doing really neat and tidy stitches. Okay, so that's just to hold it in place. And then I would also press this just to give it a crisper finish. The next step is to thread your cord through the channel that you left on the piece that's the bottom piece. Now, if you have a bodkin or threader, you can go ahead and use that. If you have a stiff enough cord, this is a piece of waxed cord, which will probably go all the way through if I want it to. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this rounded needle. It should fit. Just to thread it through. There we go. If you forget to do this part, you can do it afterwards. It's just not as easy. Now, to our piece, our fabric piece. Okay, so now the next thing that we need to do, right side up, and we need to stitch all of these component pieces together. So on your little notches that you have, you'll want the head piece. Now bear in mind that the head is going to sit up like this, so you want it to sit on top of the shape. Now I know this is hard for you to see, so what I'm going to do is I am going to put a little piece of paper or something. Let's see what I can find that's a good contrast. So you can see what I'm doing. So good idea is to tack it down first. Okay, so it's pointing in from the body shape. And so we'll tack down the head, and then on the one opposite the head, we'll tack down the tail, and then each wing, and bear in mind that they face in towards the center of the circle. At that notch, a wing, and at the opposite notch, a wing. So I'll tack that together so that you can see what I mean. So here is the shape, and as you can see, when we fold it out, we have something that looks a little bit like a winged dragon. And yes, you could do this in greens and make a lovely winged dragon. Why not? So we'll tuck that all back up, and then again, right sides together. This piece needs to go around in a circle. Now, the way that I like to do it, this piece is longer than you actually need. Okay, so you've got the option that you could trim a little bit of this off later, but what I like to do is start at the tail. I think that's a nicer place to have the join, and to leave a little bit of a gap. And then I'm going to stitch this all of the way around, encasing the pieces and easing this around in a circle as we go. And so the reason this is longer, if you've cut a little bit differently, or you have a little bit more gaps, and so that's why. So if you have your excess, you start out with a little bit of excess, and then you can join with a little bit of excess. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch all of the way around, and as I said, encasing in, so you need to make sure that all of your pieces are actually inside what you're stitching. I've now come full circle, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to join the two ends of this piece, and as you can see, there is that excess there. Now, because you're at the tail section, it's important to make sure that all of that piece of the tail is stitched in. Now I've stitched up, but I don't want to stitch the cord, so I'm not going up to where the cord is, okay, and that's where I'm going to work my knot and finish this, because I want that cord that I put through to still move. Now at this stage, a little bit of a melding with your iron if you've got one, or just finger pressing along that seam. We're going to turn it out. And you'll notice I didn't worry about that excess space. That's one of my tacking stitches, so I can just go ahead and get rid of that because we don't want that sticking out, do we? And there's another tacking stitch. Your basic shape, okay? So we'll turn it upside down, and then we need to stuff this. As I say, I quite like using cotton wool, number one, because it's 100% cotton, but if I ever do use cotton as stuffing, splitting it up seems to make it work a little bit nicer. Now if you want this to hang up, you have two choices, and a lot will depend on your stuffing. For some reason, cotton wool can be quite difficult to pass a needle through when it's dense. So, it's not a bad idea, if you actually want this to hang up, to pierce the top and take your hanging thread through at this stage. So, an awl or pokey tool or a large needle should do the trick. It really depends on what you're using with your cord. So I've got a large needle, and I'm just going to pierce this through the center of the figure. There we go. Work that through. And I'm just going to tie a knot. But as I say, you can put this through after the stuffing if you choose to. You can even go ahead and stitch something to the top. So it all depends on how you intend to use this. I'm just going to take that through. I've got a little knot, and then I can stuff this. So I've got a bit, and I'm going to pull in these two cords so that I can start to bring this around as a circle. So really it's just becoming like a drawstring bag. And once you've pulled it in a little bit, you've got a better idea of how much you want to stuff that to get a nice shape. When you're happy with the general shape, go ahead and tie these together at the bottom to pull in that drawstring. A nice little touch is to then tie it into a bow so that it hangs down from the ornament. I'm going to tie that into a double knot so that the bow doesn't come undone. You could, if you really wanted to, you could tie a really fancy knot here as well. Just trim the two tails so that they're the same length. Okay, so that's the bottom. Now, It's looking rather splayed. So now what you need to do is go ahead and take your thread and make some little stitches to just hold the wings up, the head up, and the tail up. And of course, the different ways in which you decide to stuff these will also change, because you can move the stuffing and stick the head right into it and then stuff around. So you can play around with that to also give it a different shape and each one be unique. So I think my head being up is most important. And I'll go through the stuffing to the wing, and then we'll have the wing coming up. And so just tacked down. And there is your little decorative crane ready to hang from a mobile or anything else really. As I said, you can leave off the center part, or you could work something a little bit more fancy, maybe put it onto a key ring or something. The crane is one of the most popular motifs in Japan. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. It mates for life and is said to live for 1,000 years. So because of these things, it symbolizes honor and good health and longevity and good fortune and loyalty. So it's a really sort of nice thing to give as a little keepsake to someone. So thanks very much for watching. That is how this particular Sagemon template works. We do also have rabbit template and babies and dolls, so you can make a whole mobile with lots of little characters on it. So these are all available over on our website at Gina-B Silkworks.co.uk. Do please click like, hit subscribe, and check out some of my other videos and leave me a comment. It all helps the channel, and I really appreciate hearing what you have to say. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.